My mother didn't shed a tear. She never threw the phone down. She didn't so much as wonder about my reasons. All she said was, "A backyard. Seriously, Margot? That's not a proper wedding. That's just a garden gathering for people with no money." After that, she disconnected the call. In that instant, I realized she wasn't going to attend. It wasn't her health that would keep her away. It wasn't that the timing was wrong. It wasn't even due to a sudden family crisis. Cynthia wouldn't show up, because to her, my wedding simply wasn't important enough. It failed to be grand. It lacked any flair. It didn't give her a chance to be the center of things. I stayed outside on our porch a long while after that conversation ended. The worn boards scratched against the backs of my legs, and the cold winter wind sliced through my sweatshirt. I kept the phone in my hands, almost expecting to hear it ring again. Maybe for her to say it was all a prank, or to admit she hadn't meant what she said. Yet only silence remained, settling in around me, heavy and unmoving. Eventually, Jamie emerged holding 2 cups of tea. He didn't question me about what had occurred. There was no need for him to ask. Jamie simply gave me one of the mugs and took a seat at my side, allowing the steam to hover between us as a gentle signal of mutual empathy. "She refused," I whispered at last. Jamie gave a silent nod. I forced out a short, sour laugh. "Just because it's held in the backyard," I said. "It's not an elegant hall. There are no crystal lights, no fancy cloth napkins with embroidered initials, and no gourmet beef paired with special wines. It falls short of the vision Cynthia Wynne had in mind for her daughter's wedding." "She saw herself as the centerpiece," Jamie finally observed after a pause. That realization struck me deeply. It had nothing to do with me. It never had. My mother never inquired about the lighting I devoted 7 months to designing, which involved upcycled glass bottles and painstakingly wired miniature LEDs. My mother never wondered about the way we transformed our backyard into a grove aglow with lanterns, how we dug up and replanted the wildflower beds with our own hands. She never questioned why we restricted it to 18 guests, nor did she seem curious about what it meant for us to exchange vows where our life together had taken root, rather than in a place rented for only a few hours. The only question she raised, weeks before and with a dismissive laugh, was, "You're not planning to make it potluck, are you?" She didn't bother to wait for my response. It's odd, isn't it? How some people reduce a wedding to appearances alone. Cynthia Wynne never cared about whom I was choosing as my partner. She focused instead on what others might say, what they'd be wearing, and the kind of photos likely to appear on Facebook. Being truly part of my wedding had no appeal for her. What mattered was being noticed. Despite that, I sent her an invitation. It wasn't digital. It was printed, embossed, scented with lavender, and bound with silk thread. I never received an RSVP in return. When the day arrived, after I showed up, Elena texted me just a single time. The message looked like it came from someone who'd been homeschooled. I nearly found it funny, considering she had forgotten that I'd been homeschooled for 4 years because she asked me to. How do I respond when the person who raised me quietly tells me, with no yelling, no harsh words, that my entire existence isn't good enough? How are you supposed to react if your mother, Cynthia Wynne, makes it clear your most significant day isn't worth even the effort of a car trip? I mourn. And then I move forward. I hang up the decorations. I steam my gown. I rewrite the promises I'll say. I document it all. My place in Cynthia's life has always depended on silent rules. I was always the second Wynne girl, quieter, the one who wore Elena's old clothes, and never questioned how the family photo books could have so many blank pages where I should have been. At my sister Elena Wynne's wedding, the grand event my mother, Cynthia, still brags about to anyone willing to listen, I wasn't chosen as a bridesmaid. I wasn't even given a seat at the family table. I stood behind a flowered arch with a clipboard and a walkie-talkie, making sure there were always enough crab cakes at the buffet and that the violin player didn't begin ahead of schedule. I can still picture the shoes I wore, bargain bin flats that left me with blisters by the time the first dance began. I have a clear memory of Elena's gown, imported silk adorned with beads, with a price tag higher than I paid for college, and how my mother fluffed the train before the ceremony, her eyes glossy as if she were preparing a queen. "Your time will come," Cynthia murmured when I attempted to step in for a photograph. But my opportunity never showed up. What I received instead was a series of chores. Hold this. Inspect that. Make yourself helpful. Stay out of sight. There is only one photograph of me from the whole wedding weekend. It's a fuzzy profile image of me, seen in the background cleaning the cake table. At one point, someone tagged me and referred to me as the help. I found it funny and let it go uncorrected. By that point, I already understood where I fit in. So when I shared with my mother, Cynthia Wynne, that my plans involved something small and outdoors, with no bridal party or speeches, just vows and a meal together, she was taken aback. "Small," she echoed, as if it were against the rules. She pressed her lips into a line. "That's upsetting, Margot. Don't you want something memorable for others?" But my wish was to have something meaningful for myself. I longed for the presence of those dearest to me, including the man I was about to marry. Music drifted beneath the open air, dishes passed around by guests, instead of the usual lukewarm chicken brought by staff with badges. Chandeliers were unnecessary. I didn't want a $7,000 cake. But Cynthia's expression made it clear I hadn't measured up. My decisions brought her shame. It wasn't about the size of the celebration, it was about me. I wasn't old enough in her eyes. Elena reached out to me with a phone call 7 days later. I wondered if perhaps she wanted to extend an olive branch and fill the uncomfortable void between us. However, what she actually said was, "Cynthia's concerned that you're going through some sort of crisis." She told me, "You're ruining your own wedding because you can't handle being in the spotlight." I just listened as she spoke. My response was only, "Thanks." Then I ended the call. They failed to grasp what was going on. They never truly had. What I was trying to do wasn't self-sabotage. I was taking back control. This wedding, this occasion, wasn't meant to serve as a platform for my mother. It wasn't designed to promote our family's public image. It wasn't meant to be a spectacle for distant relatives I hadn't seen since I was a teenager. It belonged to me, and I refused to organize it as though I needed anyone's blessing. On the morning I got married, the clouds were overcast, yet not ominous. It was the type of dullness that made all the colors seem especially vivid, a sort of quiet palette, where each flower transformed itself into a brushstroke. I stood barefoot on the back porch, gazing out at the rows of mismatched chairs we had borrowed from our neighbors, each one fastened with strips of colored ribbon. A gentle breeze began to blow, making the paper lanterns we'd hung in the trees sway. Their movement was quiet and graceful. Meanwhile, inside, Sophie was using the steamer on my dress, a simple pocketed cream gown. She had made it by hand. Every stitch felt like its own little expression of care. Jamie's cousin was arranging place cards on the long wooden dining table. There wasn't any calligraphy or elaborate gold touches. Instead, I had printed names on recycled cards so that each person could take theirs home and plant something later. I wandered through the area, letting my fingers graze every chair and every glass jar brimming with wildflowers and fresh herbs. These jars weren't merely decorative, they represented choices and intentions. Each small task was meaningful, and all of that meaning came from love. There was no special suite or professional makeup artist for me, only my ordinary bathroom, the mirror gripped between my fingers. I gathered my hair and twisted it into a loose knot, slipping 2 gardenias behind my ear. As I put on the dress, it felt less like protection and more like something to keep myself intact. Sophie caught my gaze in the glass. "You all right?" she asked. I gave a nod. "I thought so." She stepped closer, fixing a strap that had slipped. "You look how you always have." I had never felt truer to myself. The ceremony started right at 4:12 p.m. No music let us in. Only birdsong, the breeze, and the soft squeak of the gate accompanied us as 18 guests made their way in gently, as though witnessing a memory take shape. Jamie was waiting at the end of the path, really just the lane through the garden, dressed in a navy suit with a lopsided grin. His hands were trembling as he looked at me. My hands shook as well. We didn't have an officiant. There was no written script that we followed. Instead, we simply spoke to one another, not to the audience, just to each other. I can't recall our words now, but I can clearly remember the way it felt. It was as if, after years, I'd finally gone still, finally felt listened to by someone who wasn't just planning what they'd say next. When we shared our first kiss, the applause was loud and genuine, never forced or formal. That's the sound I love most. Dinner came out in huge enameled pots, served family style. Instead of individual plates or waitstaff, we just passed big bowls from person to person, laughter bouncing off the fence woven with ivy, someone softly singing along with a Van Morrison tune that played from a borrowed speaker. Once darkness settled in, we switched on all the lights, each string and lantern carefully hung over ours, and suddenly the yard shone as if fireflies had claimed every branch for themselves. At one point, Sophie leaned over to me and whispered that it looked like a scene from a movie. Still, it didn't feel that way to me. It felt like where I belonged. And even then, I understood that as I spent the night laughing, drinking, and dancing barefoot beneath those lights, all while knowing those who weren't present would never experience it. They wouldn't watch these moments unfold live, wouldn't witness them in vivid color, or truly understand their meaning. They would never see the way Jamie Ford gazed at me as we had our first dance. They would miss out on the heartfelt toasts given by people who genuinely understood us. They would never get to enjoy the flavor of the lavender lemonade, the fig cake, or inhale the scent of rosemary smoke drifting from the grill. All they would ever be able to do was look at photos. By then, the moment would have already passed. We hadn't planned on sharing anything online, at least not at first. Our friend Zara, who's a filmmaker but not a wedding videographer, generously offered to capture the day for us as her gift. Zara approached it the way I'd record a memory. There were no sweeping drone shots, no slow-motion footage of a veil being tossed, just honest glimpses of us, arranging tables, fixing each other's hair, and holding hands beneath the string lights. Exactly 11 days after our wedding, she sent us a short film, 80 seconds in duration. There was no voiceover or subtitles, only gentle, slow music. It opened with Jamie wiping his hands on his trousers before the ceremony, followed by a shot of me fastening a ribbon around a jar of wildflowers. The last image showed us dancing barefoot across the flagstones, while the paper lanterns drifted overhead like stars pretending to be close. The sight brought tears to my eyes. I sat and watched it by myself 3 times in our living room before I called Jamie in. Jamie stayed silent as the film played. At the end, he let out a deep breath and said, "She captured something timeless." I gave a silent nod. "Would it be small of me to share it?" I asked. He offered a gentle smile. Sometimes being petty is really just speaking the honest truth. So I quietly uploaded it. No hashtags, just a caption that read September 12th. Home love. Then I set my phone aside and went to bed. When I woke up, the view count had already reached 6,500. By midday, it had already surpassed 37. That evening, I received a message from a writer at an independent design blog asking, "Was this your wedding? Would you like to see it featured in our upcoming issue?" I stared at the message, reading it twice. That was not something I had expected. As the week closed out, our wedding appeared in 3 online magazines as well as a trending article titled, "The Most Beautiful Backyard Wedding You've Ever Seen." Though I didn't feel justified. Not precisely. What I truly felt was recognized in a way I never anticipated. Not by random onlookers, but by those who never reflected back a version of me they found preferable. Then the phone calls began. Elena reached out first. She left me a voicemail that began with, "Wow," and ended with, "Why didn't you let us know it was going to turn out like that?" After that, I got a message from my aunt. "That wedding video is appearing everywhere on my timeline. I had no idea it belonged to you. Absolutely stunning." And at last, my mother reached out. Instead of calling, she sent a text message. Simply one sentence. "Is this the wedding I wasn't included in?" I gazed at my phone for quite a while. In reality, I had invited her. She just never made the effort to respond. My mother checked in again the next day. "You embarrassed us, Margot. Everyone keeps asking why we were missing. You could have given us a heads up. Warned them?" I looked at her message once more, still unable to pinpoint which part troubled her most. Was she more upset that the wedding continued without her, or that everything looked exquisite? It didn't feel as if this was truly about being hurt. The real issue was appearances. It had always centered around reputation. I left her text unanswered, at least for a while. I honestly didn't know how to reply to someone whose main concern was being excluded from the pictures, rather than being present in the moment. Still, I replied 4 days later, after Jamie re-watched the short film, this time holding a glass of wine and letting a heavy silence linger when it finished. "You should let her see it," Jamie said gently. "Not because she's earned it, but because she clearly has no clue what she missed." So I sent a message. "If you actually want to know what truly occurred, come to the studio on Thursday at 2:30. You'll see the complete footage. Absolutely uncut." She replied 2 hours later. "All right." She arrived 14 minutes behind schedule, wearing pearls. Of course she did. She entered the small documentary studio as if she were surveying a charity she might fund. Courteous, distant, self-contained. I skipped pleasantries. I chose not to embrace her. Zara Kim had prepared the screening space for us. Just 2 seats and a compact screen, and quiet filled the room. The lighting faded. I pressed the play button. For the initial 8 minutes, she sat there with her arms crossed. I kept glancing her way, expecting a scoff, a snicker, maybe some patronizing laughter. But it never happened. The film had no narration, no soundtrack, only the actual audio. Footsteps crunching on gravel, the clink of glasses, a burst of laughter from someone in the back. My own voice trembled as I recited my vows. Jamie tripped over his words as well. My husband's throat tightened with emotion when he told me, "You make me feel like I came home." Once 14 minutes had passed, I noticed she shifted in her seat. At the 22-minute mark, she gave a hard blink, and at minute 23, with the footage showing us twirling beneath the lights, lanterns suspended above us like glowing planets, I let out a breath as if I'd been waiting to exhale. When the video wrapped up, I hit pause, leaving nothing but a frozen shot of the backyard. Empty seats, candles burned down to stubs. She didn't say anything. I waited as she remained quiet for quite a while. It also struck me as looking costly. I stayed patient. She cleared her throat. "And you never said it would turn out like that." I turned toward her, keeping my tone calm. "Would it have changed anything?" She began to speak, then stopped herself. "I did invite you," I said. "You decided not to come." "You never made it clear." I cut her off. "I wasn't seeking your approval, Mom. I was simply getting married." She turned her gaze away. The silence didn't bother me. Eventually, When she looked back at me, her tone was sharper, almost defensive. You made it seem like we didn't care. I tilted my head. Did you? She recoiled slightly, a faint, barely visible twitch near her mouth, but she stayed silent. I stood up, walked over to the door, and swung it open. Thank you for coming. Half rising from her seat, she paused for a moment before sitting again. I didn't realize it would be so beautiful, she murmured. That's how I responded softly, making my point. You never bothered to learn the truth. She walked out without offering a hug. I hadn't counted on her to do otherwise. Yet when the door closed behind her, I sensed a change. It wasn't resolution or comfort, but a sense of understanding. She stayed out of touch with me for some time after that. There was no check-in call, no lengthy message, no attempt to retract her words with lukewarm apologies, only quiet, which oddly struck me as more sincere than anything we had exchanged in years. I skipped New Year's Day, and there was no invitation for Hanukkah. Nobody announced that I was excluded, but nobody made an effort to connect either. It turned into a silent banishment, the sort that begins as separation and eventually feels like erasure. And honestly, I was all right. It was not the victorious ending you see in films, but something steady and real. A way where I realized I could stop pursuing a door that would never let me in. Instead, I threw myself into work, into Jamie, into the life we shared. The complete wedding film was selected by an arts collective in Portland. They showcased it as part of a gallery exhibit titled Intimate Architecture. We traveled there for the exhibit's opening night. I watched as viewers were moved to tears by the film. One pair approached us and wondered aloud if we were professional performers. I replied, "No, just a woman who celebrated her marriage in her own backyard, because that's truly where her journey started." 7 months went by. One day, I returned home to spot a small parcel sitting on our front porch. There was no sender information, only my name written in a neat script I recognized immediately. When I opened it, I found a photo from Elena's wedding, one I hadn't seen before. I was pictured in the background, balancing a tray of champagne glasses. My head was turned a bit, my eyes fixated on something just outside the edge of the photo. On the reverse side, a short note spanned 2 lines. "I looked right past you that afternoon. I recognize you, right now." No name attached, no signature written. But I never needed either. I didn't get it framed. I didn't make a call to express my gratitude. Instead, I simply tucked it away at the back of our wedding album, behind a photo of Jamie spinning me beneath lanterns. The two of us, barefoot and laughing, illuminated from below by the radiance of 100 little lights. That's the memory I will share. Whenever someone asks about our wedding, I'll say that we chose our own path. I'll mention that we sowed wildflowers where others wanted roses, that we served our guests directly instead of relying on a caterer's menu, that we danced on crushed stone and shared laughter beneath paper moons. And we invited all the people who mattered most, even those who didn't show up. Ultimately, who is present doesn't define a wedding. What matters is who stays by your side. When I look at the photos now, I can't pinpoint anything that's absent.